Scott Mitchell here with It's My Game speaker highlights. It's My Game Kids Tennis Conference, August 14th to the 23rd. Make sure you register. Go to conference.evolve9.com. It's the largest, only global virtual conference like never before. We're going to have over 20 speakers, 40 hours of content, and you're going to be able to go in, watch the presentations at your leisure, join live chats and discussion rooms throughout the entire 9 days. It is an amazing conference that you're going to want to attend. So make sure you register. Again, the website, conference.evolve9.com. Today I've got Howard with me. Howard, head of sports science at Bolton Arena. Welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. I think a lot of people know who you are and they know what you do, but for those that don't, tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe what you do with Bolton Arena.
Yeah, so kind of being involved in performance started kind of 2001 when I joined the Royal Marines. 6 years in the Royal Marines, 2 tours of Iraq and 1 tour of Afghan. So pretty busy.
Wow.
Left that, a little bit of time in Spain, and then did a sports coaching degree. And in that time, I did some volunteer work at Bolton Arena, which is one of the key centres in the UK. We've always been a part of the LTA's framework of delivery, and kind of then never left. I started doing some volunteering and made my way into part-time work, full-time work, and then head of department. And over time, we've grown that department. We have we obviously interact very closely with the tennis coaches. We have physios on site. We have masters level nutritionists and S&C coaches and assistant coaches. So quite a big team to manage. But yeah, I've been there 10 years now.
Wow.
In terms of my speciality was as now in terms of this field of strength and conditioning has been exclusively in tennis. We have players from 4 all the way through to 18. I'd say we're one of the big missions is to send players off and give them the opportunity to go off to universities, whether that's in the UK or the US, and we've got a very, very strong track record of getting people to the wanted destination.
Yeah, I mean, you've got some amazing knowledge and experience in the physical development arena. I mean, you've worked with, like you said, some great players, and even WTA world #1, Anna Ivanovic. Tell us a little bit of the aspects that you're working with maybe a little bit of difference from players at that level and what you're really focusing on from an athletic development or physical development, and then those kids that are younger than 10 and what you're looking for so that when they get to that level, they've got the basics down.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think, like, obviously early on in my career, I'm quite an ambitious person, and early doors, the mission was to be in the box, and for the Grand Slam and the camera pans, I wanted to be sat in there, and I did it pretty quickly. I think it was like probably 6.5 years being in the job. I got the gig with Anna, which was amazing. But obviously, I was always looking ahead, and the mission was working with tops to tour, and very much now it's using that knowledge and regressing it backwards and understanding, as you say, what needs to be worked on at the very youngest ages. And I guess over time, I've become more passionate about that and working with the youth player, because even if you were working with somebody of the caliber of Anna, you're working 20 to 40 weeks on the road. It can be very stressful. But, this year we sent players off to US universities who had been working with between 7 and 9 years. So the foundations that you're talking about, that under 10 work of working on fundamental movement skills, making sure that they're good athletes first and foremost, and the tennis will come. And that's probably the main issue right now, is that we have players rushing the process and doing far too much sport-specific training too soon, that the athletic ceiling will always be lower than somebody who really invests in their general athleticism from a young age. And then when the time to push is good to go, then they're a very robust, well-rounded athlete, and then you can really kick on. So yes, you'll see players specialising earlier, and initially they'll kick, but over time, usually they'll plateau. Not all, but that's the trend in my opinion, in terms of early burnout, either physically or mentally. So the more well-rounded we can create those athletes from a young age is vital.
Yeah, what's your philosophy around, because you hear it all the time in different parts of the world, but what's your philosophy around kids playing multi-sports? Do you think that that's a good thing? Do you think at what age should they really start to focus on tennis? I think you mentioned it a little bit, but maybe a little bit more depth with I guess some programs, or if a child came to you, they're probably going to get a lot of different aspects of the development, but most places they don't.
That's it, and that starts with education. Education and communication to the key people, key stakeholders, to the coaches, to the parents. The early sport specialisation pretty well proven that it's not the most optimal path. But we also understand that tennis is quite demanding in the amount of hours that coaches want to see players. So we're very big on facilitating multi-sports and fundamental movement skills. So within our sessions, we will do dodgeball, we will do basketball, we'll do hockey, we'll do football. That is an integral part of our program. And you would roughly say you'd like to see someone specialising around the age of 14. We try and, I've just had a session today with a player. She's off to a Div 1 American uni, and just in a passing conversation, it was, I played football at school. I did basketball until I was about 14. I also did athletics. So the body moves in many, like, there's a few ways the body moves, but there's many ways in which it can be challenged. So if you've got an athlete who's challenged that body via gymnastics and athletics and team sports and other individual sports, again, that body is better prepared for the robustness that's needed on the tour. And being on the tour and being around, and see how many players get a lot of soft tissue work, they have a lot of strapping. This could be down to a narrow, what I would call a narrow bandwidth of athleticism. They're not great athletes. They're great tennis players, fantastic, world class, but athletically they're poor. So for me, robustness goes down. The least kind of, if you're one-dimensional, robustness is low. If you're multi-dimensional, your robustness is much higher.
So as you travel around, or if you've seen other clubs or academies, what are some of the areas that you think that they're missing in that developmental process? Do you spend a lot of time off the court developing these things and then slowly add it to the on-court movement, or is it a combination? Where do you think they're missing some of these key elements to get them to the success that you've had?
Yeah, so it's for me, it's frequency of key movement patterns that create key shapes. So our current mission is to create tennis super movers, and we're aiming to do that through our product. And ultimately, it can provide a 10-15 minute warm-up. I speak to people, on tennis coaches, pretty regularly on Facebook in different groups, and I'll drop a question here and I'll ask a poll there. And you discuss around the warm-up for the tennis, and far too often I hear jog and dynamic stretching, and then that's it. You're missing an unbelievably vital part where 10 minutes, 2 to 3 times a week, year round, is going to add up to a lot of S&C or physical sessions. So we strongly believe in rehearsing these shapes. So the really fundamental ones are your squats and your lunges and your ability to push and pull and brace. And then we move from these sort of strength movements into working spatial awareness, into working agility, working on stability, then finally coordination. And that's it. You're able to do that in 10-15 minutes easily. Right. And I just see, and I spoke to somebody from the USTA, and he said, he can think back to when it was pushed out that dynamic stretching is the key thing. But for me, I would much take, the ability to do a lunge or a split squat through a full range of motion over a few stretches. You want to rehearse these shapes that we see on the court. So a lunge is the same as an open stance or closed stance forehand and backhand. So I'd like to think that people can get their heads around the fact that rehearsing the shapes that are seen in the tennis is only going to underpin the tennis work. So far too often, it's not racket work that's the issue, it's body work and footwork. And again, they're underpinned by some real basic elements.
Yeah, and you see it again in different areas of the world, but especially here in the United States, you see, and you mentioned the warm-up exercises, and you see way too many coaches still in that mindset of, here are the 4 or 5 things we're going to do. They're going to jog a couple laps. They're going to do this, that, or the other, and they're really kind of doing activities rather than something specific. And I think you talked a little bit about it, that everything that you do is very specific. So when you think about trying to develop these elements, like you said, the lunge is similar to the open stance. are you doing similar activities from the warm-up standpoint every single day? It's the same, or do you kind of rotate it around to kind of keep it fresh, even though it's
Yeah.
still really focused on one little area?
Yeah, so we basically group it into 3 sessions. So session 1 is focused on forward and back. So if we're talking about the lunge, it's going to be a forward lunge or a backwards lunge. We're going to do movement where we sprint forward and stop. We're going to do things in terms of little single leg squat works in a pattern that's forward and back. Then we do the next session is side to side. So a lunge is going to be a lateral lunge. Our movement patterns can be shuffling, crossovers, running steps. Then our third session is multi-directional. So in that instance, maybe we're doing like where the front leg will cross over the opposite leg. We'll do more orientation drills where we're pivoting and turning. So we rotate through these 3 sessions. So ideally you would do these 3 sessions up to 3 to 6 times a week. You would stay on one program for 6 weeks and then the program changes, but the format doesn't. Just each exercise gets a little bit of a tweak, a little bit of a progression. But as I say, it rehearses and keeps going back to these fundamentals, the fundamentals of squats, lunges, but also running, hopping, skipping, jumping, changing direction. So fundamentals, and then at the end we will always work on coordination where the drill will include a tennis ball. So you've got that visual component as well.
Yeah, that's great information. Like I said, I don't think we have enough coaches in the U.S. in particular that are really focusing in on these activities. Maybe they just don't know yet what to do, or maybe they're, my age where this is the way we've always done it. This is the way I was taught when I grew up, and the warm, like you said, we've moved away from static, which is great. So static exercises at the beginning, and now here you see, like you said, the dynamic part of it, but every exercise should have a specific reason for doing it. So when you look at players and you're going through this, how are you assessing them to know what part of the warm-up exercise or into the skill development? Do you assess them through match play? Is there something specific that you're looking for as you're trying to assess?
Yeah, I guess it's these shapes. The biggest thing that sits in the middle is shapes, and it's then, as you and I as the coach work together, we can observe these shapes. We can communicate about these shapes and use similar language. And then if there is an issue, like you say, if we spot an issue, then there's an intervention as well. So again, what we do, we have image, and we'll have a tennis player, and we'll draw the yellow lines through their body, maybe mainly through their trunk and lower body. And then we'll pull up a basic exercise and we'll see, can you see these two are very similar? So say, for example, there's a technical component and the upper body is either too far forward or too far back. So too far back, they're hitting the back fence, too far forward, they're hitting the net. What we would do is encourage a movement break and try and pinpoint, okay, what fundamental shape is being broken? And then what exercise can I just bring in now as a movement break and rehearse to underpin that? So if we've got lunge, open stance and we're collapsing, then we might rehearse some backwards lunges just to rehearse that upper body position. You might then put them in the bottom of the lunge, just hold it there, hand feed some balls so they're keeping that, open it up, now hand feed out to the side so they move and hit. So it's always about regressing and then progressing back into the skills. So the last thing that I want to say is that you would spend most of your session doing these physical elements, but really, really understand that when something breaks down, there'll be something technical, but for sure there'll be something physical that's underpinning it that you could rehearse.
So there's a lot of coaches around the world that are going to be watching this, and if you had to just tell them maybe 1 or 2 things, so what we want the coaches to do is obviously assess the players at all times, obviously during practice, but as well during match play, right? So if you had 1 or 2 things that you would want coaches that maybe are new to trying to chart matches or gather data of their players during tournament play, what are the 2 or 3 little items that you want them at least to focus in on the beginning as they start to get used to the whole process?
Yeah, I guess first and foremost, like, you guys are highly skilled coaches. If we think about the components of teaching somebody the serve, it's quite complex. Versus a squat, you've got to look for 5 things. So you guys are already ahead of this. And then if it's on the court, I would say a little bit of an education and teach around what change of direction should look like. And then again, try and pick out those shapes. So if we're seeing the body on hit that we collapse sideways, then there's a good chance we need to do some core stability work. if we see things in terms of the lower body. You know, we're not sharp enough off the ground, the split step slow, then we need to do some plyometric activities. If after the shot and when they're pushing back, they're not quite in the right acceleration shape, then they're not going to move quickly. And it may be that they lose that point after about third or fourth shot in the rally. So if they're a little slow on the first ball, they might get to the next one. And then by the next shot, they're going to be a little bit late. And the next shot, they are late. And then the fourth shot, they don't make it too. So it's underpinning this kind of accumulation of bad mechanics. You know, that's why they lose the point. It wasn't anything to do with that racket work. So I guess it's trying to pinpoint where it starts to break down. Are they slow to the ball? Are they unstable around the ball? Or are they slow recovering from the ball to the wrong place? So there's many things, but from a physical perspective, can they get off the mark quickly? Are they stable on the shot? And then do they recover with real intensity?
Good. Yeah, I think that's great information. I think that's what coaches are looking for, right? They want to help their players, but some are new. Maybe they just came out of college themselves and are really more on the academy side and trying to learn this stuff. So any kind of input and that insight is great information for them as they get into our industry and dig deep and hopefully do well. When Mike reached out to you and wanted you to be involved and be a presenter, what excited you about this conference? What's different about this than what normally we see when it comes to tennis conferences?
I think it's focused in on a very clear age group where sometimes, you know, I've put on conferences myself and it's, you know, the first one was kind of participation to performance. So straight away it could be like, I am a performance coach, so it kind of alienates. This is very clear on the demographic that it's for, and that's great that there's going to be so many common threads through everybody's talk, and that would be the key thing. Like I got taught once, it was like, you know, your job is to, when you go to a conference, is be like a scaffolder and see the stuff that's connected and the threads throughout, not be a magpie that just tries to pick out shiny things.
Right.
But for sure, wherever the speaker's from, we will all talk about the same thing, and I think hopefully that comes across, that there is no magic sauce. There's no, it's fundamentals and basics that underpins everything. What Ruben will talk about and what Judy will talk about and I'll touch on, you'll keep hearing similar things. So try to pick out those commonalities because they're the stuff that doesn't change. But this speaker, his philosophy on this might be slightly different to mine, but underneath that, we'll very much agree on these things here. So that'd be the exciting thing.
Yeah, and I think we're building a community and a network, and hopefully over time, you're right. You're hearing all this information, and you know, it's very similar with a little bit of changes here and there, but that's what we need. I don't think we've had a conference like this, you know, in my 30 plus years of being in the industry. I know we haven't had something that has this wide a variety, that is this global, and it's really exciting to see, and we're excited to hear your presentation. So your presentation is on moving on up. So tell us a little bit about what the coaches should expect with that presentation. Yeah,
for sure. So, you know, what we talked about, ultimately we want to create great tennis movers. We want to create super movers. And it's understanding what we want in terms of that real agile athlete that is both a quick thinker and a quick mover, and then dissecting that, what's required to work on both the physical and cognitive components. What are all the different pieces, and try and not overawed, like not get too confused and not kind of get overawed by, I just don't know how to do this. It's try and simplify it, that again, rehearse this stuff, work on this stuff, look out for this stuff, challenge the brain as much as the body, and it all comes together and you're going to become a much more kind of agile athlete. And that's agility. Agility is a combination of the physical components, of change of direction skills, and the cognitive components. So we've got to constantly challenging both of those.
It's going to be a great presentation. I can't wait. We look forward to having you involved, and I can't thank you enough. I know you're so busy traveling around and doing everything, so I appreciate your time with us. Howard, if there's, I know August, let me tell everybody real quickly, August 14th to the 23rd is the conference, so go on to conference.evolve9.com to register. And Howard, again, I know you're busy, so thank you so much for your time with us.
No worries. Thanks for having me.